Good afternoon. It's not morning now. It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
My name
Good
is
afternoon.
Jennifer. I am the manager of I've Squared at the New Haven Free Public Library. I'm very excited to have you all here for this class on branding and marketing. I would like to introduce first Giulia Gambale. She's our EIR, and she offers office hours in the library. I'll put a link in the chat for you guys to be able to access that, so I don't have to give the spiel of days and times that I don't know off the top of my head. For those just joining, just so you know, this is being streamed onto our Facebook. So if you are not interested in having your face on Facebook, please keep your cameras off. With that being said, I would like to introduce Rick Callahan of Krative. Rick is an industry professional on branding and marketing. He has done wonderful work for the library as well as many other local and national and international companies.
With national at this point, yeah.
National companies. And he is going to be running this course. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Between Giulia, Rick, and I, we should be able to see it. And if you are watching us on Facebook, you can put your questions or comments in the comments section in the bottom, and we will pass them on. So with that being said, Rick, it is all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I see a couple of familiar names here in the Zoom room as well. So hello to those folks as well. And those I have not met yet, hello to you. So as Jennifer said, today we're talking about branding and marketing. Specifically, I'd like to talk about brand marketing. So the idea of marketing is thrown out there quite a bit, and people use it to mean a lot of stuff. Most often I see people talk about marketing as meaning either sales or advertising, and not necessarily more about the brand's strategy and how it appeals to certain demographics, audience, etc. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to that. So I have two parts of a presentation today. So the first part is really more of a formal presentation with a little bit of a kind of mini game thrown in there that we can collaborate on. And the second part of this presentation is going to be kind of walking you through a brand positioning workbook. So hopefully those of you that are watching this, at least some of you should have downloaded that workbook yesterday or sometime in the past several days, and maybe even started doing it for yourself. The idea is that this brand positioning workbook is something that should walk you through many steps to get to your own brand positioning statement and being able to figure out how to implement your brand and execute it in the real world through marketing. So I'm going to walk you through that during the second half of today's presentation. If at any point anyone has any questions, I'm a very collaborative person. Feel free to chime in if you're in the Zoom session. If you want to unmute and ask a question, feel free. It won't be too disruptive, I promise. Otherwise, you can chat, as Jennifer said, in the Zoom or on Facebook in the live stream if you're watching while we're live. Otherwise, I think we're probably good to get started. Giulia, did you have anything you want to start with or say before I jump into the presentation side? Oh, you were muted there.
Apparently being muted, that means no. No, I think everything between Jennifer and yourself, we have a lot to get to. We do have a question in the chat. How can you, okay, perfect. How can you get
I
to
will
the
put
chat?
the handbook link into the chat.
Yeah.
Great, cool. And like I said, the handbook or the workbook, we won't be going through until the second half of this. So feel free while we're going through this first half, if you don't have it yet, you could use the link that Jennifer is going to put in the chat. And be sure to use the code that she's going to supply to get it for free. Otherwise, it does have a fee associated, but everyone in this workshop will get it for free. So, all right, sounds good. So I will actually start sharing my screen. Give me one moment here. All right, can someone just confirm that they are seeing a company logo actually? Krative.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah.
Cool, great, thank you. All right, so today we're talking about branding and marketing, as I said earlier, and specifically, I want to gear this towards more the startup sized operation or somebody just getting into business. We're taking this basically from the foundations, from the basics. So you don't really need a lot of knowledge in marketing to be able to do what we're going to do today. So who is this guy? Who am I, right? My name is Rick Callahan. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a consultant. I'm the founder and CEO of Krative, which is a brand strategy agency, and we are a full service marketing firm as well. And I've helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small businesses, as well as larger Fortune 500 companies as well. But my favorite type of client to work with or folks to inform, such as today, are the small business owners such as yourselves here today. So thank you for joining us. So what am I here for? Why are we talking today? I want to help you with brand marketing. So there's traditional marketing, right? And this is something that usually when people are thinking about traditional marketing, they're talking about advertising, they're talking about demographics, they're talking about, advertising towards people of a certain age or in a certain location, maybe they earn a certain amount of income, things like that, right? And with traditional marketing, this is a good way to go into marketing because you're talking about factual stuff. You can find data to calculate the risks associated with your marketing efforts, right? The con to traditional marketing, in my perspective, is that it's slow. It's looking at data of past, right? So things that have already happened. It's looking at things that aren't really the trends coming up necessarily. So it's not necessarily responding to cultural shifts. It might not be the most effective way to communicate new ideas with an evolving brand. So I'll explain what I mean by that in a few moments. So traditional marketing, though, overall is great for sustaining an established brand. So you think of somebody like, I don't know, a Geico or some big national brand that everybody knows that's been around for a while. You're going to do traditional marketing quite a bit because it works well. It's repeatable, it's scalable. You can train it to all sorts of different folks on how to implement it, all that good stuff. However, we're not talking about that stuff today. We're talking about brand marketing. So in contrast to traditional marketing, what brand marketing is something that is trying to market towards the unconscious or the emotional side of the people that you're trying to appeal to, right? And the pro to this is that it adapts to those cultural shifts that I mentioned a little earlier. It's efficient, it's quick to implement. It's something that you can quickly go to market and advertise or communicate to certain audiences rather quickly, right? And the con to this, though, is that it's hard to define. That's why we're spending nearly 2 hours today talking about this. This is a very abstract concept, but there are certain steps you can take to implement brand marketing, and they're not too difficult if you go about it a certain way, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So what this is great for is introducing a lovable brand. When you are doing brand marketing, you want to resonate with people at a core level, somewhere that they emotionally relate to. And when you can do that with an audience that really loves what your brand stands for, what it does, why it does it, all those things, you build a fan base, not just customers or clients, but people who will follow your brand, people that enjoy what your brand is and not just what it has or can give them. So in my mind, brand marketing is greater than traditional marketing, but then again, I'm biased. That's exactly what my company does. So as a startup, what does traditional marketing look like? This stuff, right? All these numbers and charts and graphs, and these are very helpful when you're dealing with a lot of data and you're looking for a pattern and things like that, but we're not doing that stuff today, right? So instead, we want to do brand marketing. So what does that look like to a startup? Well, it involves some tough questions. In particular, it's really one question, actually. It's why, right? So the question why is very, very, very important. It helps us get to a core aspect of whatever thing we're talking about. In this case, it's going to be your brand. So I've heard people say things like, small business clients say, hey, we're so much better than our competitors. And my response to them is, well, why? Or I've heard them say things like, if more people just knew about us or what we do, they'd pick us over our competitors. And again, the question is why, right? So it's a bit of a pattern here. If somebody might say, or if you listening in or watching in would say, I love what I do for my work, I want to ask you why, right? And a couple more examples here. So most of our new business is from referrals. I hear that all the time when I'm dealing with new clients who are looking to build up their marketing. If they can say that a lot of our business is word of mouth or from referrals, if we could figure out why, we could figure out certain aspects about their brand and how to market it. So another example, people who love us or people who know us love us. Well, why? Why is that? What do they know about you? Why do they love you? Okay. So the question why will lead you to the single most important aspect of your brand. And that's what we're going to spend quite a bit of time on today, is what that certain aspect is. And that is your brand's positioning. Okay. So let's define some stuff, right? We're talking about a lot of ideas. We're talking about traditional marketing. We're talking about brand marketing. We're talking about brand positioning. The question why. So let's start defining something. So what is a brand anyway? It is a lot more than a name or a logo. So some folks will hear the name or the word brand and they'll think it's their logo. A logo is a part of a brand, but it's much more than that. So according to the dictionary, or one of the dictionaries, it's a noun. It's a class of goods identified by name as the product of a single firm or manufacturer. All right, that's a technical answer. My answer is a little bit more fuzzy, but I like my response better. So it's a brand. A brand is the culmination of all the perceived associations related to a product, service, business, or person. So if you repeat that real quick, it's the culmination of all the perceived associations of something, right? So regardless of those perceptions being based on real experiences that have happened already in the past, or the expectation of how you might perceive a brand and how you might experience it in the future, all of that is your branding. Okay, so it's kind of a fuzzy idea, but that's essentially where we're going today with all of this. Giulia, are you keeping track of, just in case if anyone chimes in on chat?
Yep.
I don't have that.
I'm taking a look
Okay.
at the chat. And actually I did, I had a question for everybody who's currently in the room. And if you want to chime in, I'm just curious as to, you know, what everybody's working on, where they are in their endeavors and what you're kind of looking to get out of the workshop. I know we had mentioned as we were marketing this, that it's an interactive workshop. So, you know, as Rick said, please feel free to chime in and, you know, talk about what you want to get out of it and some of the things that you've thought about the brands, you know, what brands means.
What
Hi, my
means to
name
you,
is
right?
Amber. Oh.
Hi, Amber.
Hi. What I hope to get out of the workshop, it's just trying to learn how to brand myself as far as social media goes, because I have a YouTube channel.
Mhm.
And I'm a major in media studies with communications. So if I can get on that influencer level as far as like making commentary stuff, what I do on YouTube, I just kind of do reviews, or sometimes I do skits and comedy related stuff. So if I could just like brand myself better and get my name out there.
Great. Yeah. So the entire second half of today's session is going to be very, very interactive and more of a workshop where we can talk about those specific goals for you, Amber, and anyone else who wants to chime in as well. So Amber, to you specifically, did you get a chance to download the brand positioning workbook?
I didn't.
Okay. So Julie, if you're able to, or whomever,
Yeah, I
if you can
believe it's
add
in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can look in the chat, Amber, there should be a link to be able to get the brand positioning workbook along with the code to get it for free. So
Okay.
you're welcome to do that while I'm doing this first half of the workshop, for sure. And
All
that goes
right.
to anybody watching and anybody in this Zoom.
All
So
right.
thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. And does anybody else want to share a little bit before we continue on with the presentation as far as what you want to get out of today and what this branding workshop means to you?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Yes.
Hi there.
My name is Ada, and the reason why I'm here is I intend to, launch my small business in e-commerce within the next month, and so I just want tips on, as I start and along the way, how to just do things right to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of what we'll be doing today is really trying to define how you present your brand. So perhaps prior to launching your e-commerce brand, you might be able to make some modifications, tweaks, or refine it based on what we do today. And I'd be happy to chat more about that in the second half of this workshop as well, for sure. Thank you, Ada. Does anyone else want to share a little bit what they're hoping to get out of today's brand marketing workshop, or where they're at?
Sure, I'll go ahead if nobody else is ready. Hey everyone, my name is Casey. And I really was so intrigued by this because I am a new real estate agent who's still navigating the way through social media and branding myself and putting myself out there. So I'm very excited to see what we're going to speak about today.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Casey, for chiming in. I appreciate that and introducing yourself. Looks like Bethany raised her hand. Bethany, you want to chime in?
Sure. Hi, Rick. Hi, Giulia. It's so
Hi,
good to
Bethany.
see you guys. So I guess I'm interested in rebranding in that I've moved to a new place, and I have the opportunity to live with family right now, so I'm not under a lot of pressure to immediately create something, but I want to have to take the time to create, I don't know, I guess the next phase of what I want to be as an entrepreneur, as a musician, but also in creating artsy things that are useful to people. So it's kind of a long-term thing, but just getting started on that, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear from you, Bethany. I'm glad you joined today. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, as far as today's workshop and what we'll be doing with the brand positioning workbook, it's a pretty helpful tool, regardless of if you've not started defining your brand yet, or launched a business at this point yet. It helps to kind of ask the tough questions to get you there. Or if you already have an established brand and you want to reassess whether you are effectively communicating, expressing, and portraying your brand. So I think, Bethany, based on what you just talked about, it'll be very helpful as well for you to kind of regroup and maybe evolve from where you're at. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we go back to the presentation? And again, feel free to chat in the chat box, whether you're watching live on a live stream or if you're in the Zoom, or if you want to chime in, if you're in the Zoom, feel free to do so. All right, let me go back to sharing my screen. So what is a brand anyway? We're talking about how it is the culmination of the perceived associations related to something, your product, your business, you as a person, etc. Right? And it doesn't matter if those perceptions are based on the past experiences, right? Like a reputation, or what you hear of, like a reputation that precedes somebody or a brand. So I think that is a very apt way to define what a brand or branding is, based in the context of how we'll be using it today. So let's talk about brand positioning, but you know what? There's too much learning happening. Why don't we change it up and play a little game? So anybody who's on Zoom, feel free to speak up and unmute yourself during this session if you'd like. Let's have a little fun. So this game is called Name That Brand. It's everyone's favorite game show gimmick. And you didn't know you were going to be on a game show today, but here you are. So we have company A and we have company B, right? And what we want to do here is we want to compare and contrast them against each other so we could figure out the brand positioning of each of these companies. I like doing this sort of interactive experience to explain brand positioning because I think it makes a lot more sense this way. So company A is a request a ride on demand service. Company B is the same. Okay, so they do exactly the same thing. You can request that ride whenever you want. How does it work? So company A says, we pioneered this industry. You just use an app with geolocation tracking, no hailing a taxi cab or scheduling a private driver ahead of time. Okay, that sounds familiar to me. I'm thinking to some of you listening in and watching, that probably sounds very familiar. All right, what does company B say about how does it work for them? How is it different? We can do the same thing. Plus, we use pink mustaches on our cars, so we're easy to spot. Okay, interesting. We're starting to see a little bit of a difference between company A and company B here. So why pick you? According to these brands, company A is superior to taxis, more affordable than a private driver, and you can arrive in style if you'd like. Okay, that makes sense. We're getting very clear on what's important to that brand and how they convey their value, right? Company B, Nothing pretentious here. We're casual, we're fun and friendly. We're your friend with a car. So you can kind of see how company A is differentiating or positioning themselves against company B and vice versa. The difference isn't necessarily what they do, because that's exactly the same. They both are a on-demand ride hailing service app thing, right? How it works is pretty similar, except one has a pink mustache, the other one doesn't. But why people would pick them, that's the key differentiator between these two companies, right? That's their brand positioning that differentiates them. One's more about being casual and friendly. The other one's a good replacement for higher end taxi or a private driver, that sort of thing. So anyone have any ideas who these might be? Anyone want to chime in on that?
Looks like Uber and Lyft.
I was gonna say the same thing.
All right, ding, ding, ding. We have some winners here. Pretty good. Okay, so good responses there. So let's go a little deeper here. So company A, some of their original brand positioning, they were trying to go for more of an elevated style. This is now their Uber Black tier of service versus the regular Uber service. So they started trying to be more arriving style. You can see this ad that they developed way back when, right? In contrast to the brand positioning as implemented by company B, Lyft, your friend with a car, and it's a very like casual, friendly, good feeling vibes right there, right? Very, very different ways they appeal to different target markets just based on how they present themselves. Does that make sense? Are there any questions on that in the brand positioning concept as we're showing it so far? Okay, great. So I'm going to move forward a little bit. Now, if you look at this, company A, company B, remember they both did the same thing technically. How they do it is only slightly different, but why people should choose them and why they do what they do is different. So the perceived association of each of these companies, just based on how they appear in these advertisements here, are very different from each other. So you can see how these brands present themselves based on their brand positioning is what defines them even more than just what they do. Okay, so let's move on to another game. Good job, that was too easy. Let's try something a little more difficult. So let's move on to this one here. Come on. Name that core value, everyone's least favorite game show gimmick. So let's start with a simple example. Let's put some quadrants up on the screen here, right? It's two axes. And on one side, why don't we put the word affordable? And on the opposite side, we'll put expensive. Now, if you or when you guys start doing this for your brands today, when we do the workbook, you may not use these exact words, but you might use similar concepts, or you might use a different word to describe these. I'm just breaking it down to something very easy to understand. Affordable, expensive, two very different ends of a spectrum of pricing, right? So I think that makes sense. You got one on one side, one on the other. So let's put something up top and something down below, just to kind of create a nice grid here. So we need some examples. Let's get Taco Bell in here for a brand. Let's get Morton's Steakhouse in here. I think based on price alone, that's pretty easy to see that Morton's is probably more expensive. So let's put them to the right, closer to the expensive word. And Taco Bell's more affordable. Let's put them to the left side. But this doesn't really position them in the market space. Their brand position isn't very clearly defined. It's just one thing that we're basing it on, pricing. Why don't we add in something else in the top and bottom here? Let's say high quality and low quality. Again, I don't think any brand would ever call themselves low quality. They would have a different word, but just for the sake of this exercise, let's go ahead and put them where they should be. So Taco Bell, there's a perception that maybe they're not the highest quality, freshest ingredients sort of thing, as opposed to Morton's Steakhouse, which might be higher quality or whatever compared to Taco Bell. Does that make sense how we're kind of positioning these in these quadrants?
Yes.
Does anyone? Great, thank you, Casey. If there's any questions, feel free to chime in. All right, so that's the basic idea. So let's clear that out. Now, one thing that I do when I work with most of my clients is I work with them to figure out what their core values are. So a little earlier, we're talking about why. Why is more important than the what and even the how, right? So core values are really just, in the way that I use them, These are just concepts or ideas that represent that deep-rooted belief or that deep-rooted value system you might have of why you do something or why you appeal towards something. So these are just some of the words that we use when I'm in person with clients. I'll spread a whole deck of cards with one word of each, and they have to pick these core values out and sort them and things like that. So here's some examples. When you think about your brand, do any of these words relate to your why or your core values of why your brand exists and why people should perceive value in it? So just feel free to take a screenshot in here. If you did get the brand positioning workbook, the very last page, I believe, or second to last page, is the entire list of these core value words, including these as well. So let's go back here and try something a little bit different. So let's use some of those real words that we usually use with our clientele. I put accessible, I put authentic, that's on one thing, one axis. So accessible meaning it's easier to get access to in general. Authentic meaning, well, I'll show you an example. So let's put in the Healing Corner. This is one of my clients. They're a medical marijuana dispensary in Connecticut, and they see themselves as very high quality of everything they do with their clientele. And they are incredibly authentic with the relationships that they build. They're not just trying to sell their product, they're trying to actually give people hope and compassion in their healing with what they're doing, right? So they're going to be up in this quadrant somewhere over here. Now let's compare them to this random internet company I found, or logo I found on the internet for weed for you. So in contrast to the Healing Corner, who is quality and authentic, this other brand, where do you guys feel like this should fit just based on appearances of this logo? In contrast to the Healing Corner. And anyone can chime in on this. Would we put it more towards the left top, bottom, right?
I would do left bottom.
I would agree. So this, thank you very much. Yep, Bethany, yep, I see you typed it there as well. Yeah, so this is a more fun looking brand. They're trying to make it more accessible for literally everybody with the colors and the types of wording and the fonts they're using. All these little decisions of how your logo looks, how it gets presented, how people perceive it, are little subconscious emotional cues that people pick up on just in an instant when they look at a brand's identity, logo, website, advertisement. And a couple of you just figured that out or just did that now when comparing this Read For You against the Healing Corner logo, based solely on a logo. We didn't even talk about their whys, right? So really just trying to hammer home this idea of brand positioning and how it affects every facet as you develop develop your brand and put it out there and market it.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I
Ada?
think I see what you're saying. This is Ada. If that they call themselves Weed For You, is kind of more very casual, and so it's in what weed is. So it kind of makes it more fun and seem more accessible, as opposed to if they had said something cannabis
Right.
then it would have seemed
no, exactly. That's exactly right. So they chose wording that comes off much more like pretty much everybody can get it, like casual, right? You would speak that way with just any casual friend, versus if you're a doctor who's prescribing a medical card to somebody in Connecticut for this type of service and product, they're probably never going to say those words ever, right? They're going to be a little bit more on the doctoral side of it, and a little bit more professional sounding, et cetera, et cetera. So you're absolutely right. We positioned it there because it is more fun and casual and accessible. That's exactly right.
And can I give you an example of when I saw a quadrant, a product that is not on this list, but came to my mind? It's quality. That's what did you have? I don't see the thing. That was.
Yep, I'll pull it up. Let me see. We can go back. You want me to go back?
Yeah. Thank you. That was the 4 quadrants.
Yep, going to it.
Okay, that was high quality. The one where we had the Weed For You.
Okay, sure. 1 second.
That was high quality, authentic, and fun. All 3.
You know what came to my mind is high quality, it's definitely authentic, and it's also fun. It came to me that Benetton, you know, the United Colors of Benetton, their clothing. We know Benetton's clothing is high quality clothing, it's authentic. You see the people they have in the ad, they all look different. They're never, you know, the person in the street, they always have exotic or something looking very attractive. And then the fun colors. So it's like all three.
Right, yeah. And so you seem to be very good then, Ada, at picking up like what is it they're expressing just by how they present themselves, right? And that almost shows you exactly what their brand positioning is, because you might be able to compare them against someone who's not as bright, vivid, fun, colorful, high quality, right? And then they're going to present themselves very different, that other entity. So it sounds like you have a natural talent to kind of pick that up just based on how you perceive the experience of either an ad or that brand itself. So that's exactly right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right, so let's move forward a little bit here. Just got to click ahead. Let's see here. All right, so going back to this concept of branding and marketing, really you want to use the question why to discover your core values, right? So when we talk about core values, core values are the thing that is the deciding elements within yourself or within the corporate culture of a brand that really don't change over time, right? These are the motivating factors. These are the value systems that you might have built in as to why this entity exists, this company, this brand, this product, whatever it is. That stuff should be essential to the foundation of every decision that is made within that organization for that brand, because you can always go back to, you know, do I want my website to be this color or that color? Or do we want this tagline versus that tagline? Well, go back to your core values, go back to your why. What drives your brand? What is at the root of it? Not just the what's and the how's, right? But that deeper analysis of like core values. Is that making sense to those here in the Zoom?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So being able to be consistent with your brand by always going back to your core values also allows you to evolve your communication to be more effective and consistent as well. So that way it sounds like your brand. Your brand gets a whole personality and voice all its own. And it doesn't have to sound like the owner. It could sound like a different thing. And that's because it's going to have its own brand personality, its own tone of voice, its own beliefs, all because you have certain core values that represent how you position your brand. So it's a lot of moving pieces, but I hope that makes sense with these couple of exercises we did so far. Any questions right now based on this, what we just went over? Okay, so moving forward. So to map your brand positioning, you're going to need to know your core values. You're going to need to know your target markets, right? So these are the people that feel what your brand is putting out there. They get it, right? And they feel like your brand gets them. So you really want to connect with them on that deeper level, not just a, hey, buy our stuff, it's a good price or something like that, but more of a, you fall in love with a brand that seems to really believe in the things you care about, right? And the things that they do in that organization seem consistently around that same value system, those core values. So these are the people, the target markets are the people that perceive your brand to speak to their personal truths or their core values. So it's not about having customers, it's about having loyal fans in this regard. So that's the benefit of brand marketing versus what I would call more traditional marketing. You get loyal fans, you get people who love your brand. You don't just get people who are just customers, maybe one and done, right? So any questions on what we've gone over so far? This is kind of the midpoint of our presentation for today before we get to the workbook. Okay, great. So let me stop the share. So if you have downloaded the workbook, if you've started it, this is the point where we're going to shift over to going through the workbook together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a blank version of the brand positioning workbook on my screen and share that with you guys and talk through the process But what I'd like to do is be interactive. I'd like to have those who are actually in this session, this workshop live, to chime in and share what they came up with for their brand, and we can work on it together. And sometimes the questions you may have or might be wondering, please speak up, because others will probably have very similar questions, or that context might help them to move forward in their brand positioning workbook as well. So Julia, is there anything that you want to chime in with at this point, or review or recap before we jump into all that?
No, I think you covered all of that. I think the only thing that I do want to say is I remember way back when, before this was even a workbook, I went through this exercise with you, and you know, it's very telling. And I know a lot of times as we work through it, you know, it may seem like, wow, I'm a lot of these things, but as you just keep asking yourself the questions, and you know, this is something that the reason why we sent out the workbook earlier was so that you could kind of go through it and start familiarizing yourself with it. Not saying that you won't be able to do it today, and I would say do it often as well, to just make sure, because the core value of your brand and your business, that if you get kind of lost in the daily kind of minutia, it's good to like step back, you know, once a month, even once a quarter, and just go back through and just say, yeah, am I doing this because this is what I love, because this is what I believe, and because this is what I want to provide to my customers or clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree that this is something to the workbook to come back to every now and then. And if you can't do it every month, like Julie said, perhaps each quarter, right? And just examine, you know, are you more in line with your brand positioning now, or does it need to evolve? This workbook should help you be able to assess that and kind of pivot and evolve where you need to. All right, so I'm going to pull up the workbook now. So this workbook was designed to be, oh, looks like Tony might have their hand raised. Is that a recent thing? Tony, did you have something you wanted?
Yes. Yes, please. I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
If a business is new, you know, still in the process, or we've set up, and we think we've defined our values, can they change, or once you've defined, should they remain the same?
So generally what we'll see is a brand new business is going to take a stab at what their values are, right? It's like throwing darts at a dartboard. Your aim might be pretty good. You might get the bullseye first, but that's unlikely. But over time, what's going to happen is you're going to refine it. You're going to get a little bit clearer and clearer when you come back to these exercises. So if it's a brand new entity you're starting, get in business, start it, make your assumptions on your values. But you'll probably get feedback from clientele or customers as far as what it is they love about what you're offering, what value you provide. And they'll give you that insight of what makes them an ideal target market or not. And you can reflect your brand accordingly, right? So it's less about getting it perfect right away and more about always being slightly more perfect. So it's always moving towards and always moving goalposts, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does, Rick. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other questions before we hop into the workbook for anyone? All right, great. Let me pull that up. So you feel free to follow along on yours if you guys have them downloaded or printed out. Either way, this was designed so you could use it on like a tablet and use a stylus or something, or you could print it out and write in it as well. So I'm just going to scroll through. So I do like this quote here that we use sometimes for my company. The best thing you can do to improve your chances of growing your business is by clearly communicating its value. So the better, more effective and concise way you can convey value that your brand offers to its ideal target markets, the better chances you are going to have of actually growing that business. It's as simple as that. And that's the whole point of this brand positioning workbook that we're doing here. All right, so I'm going to skip a lot of the text. I'm not going to read this verbatim. You guys have these workbooks. You can read them yourselves. I'll go over the main points. So brand positioning is about providing clarity this workbook, brand positioning workbook, is about providing clarity of your brand. It's about unearthing certain insights about what your brand stands for, what it offers, what those core values are, who those target markets are. And by the time you finish all those little ingredients, figuring out what they are, you'll end up with a brand positioning statement, which, you know, at a surface level looks like, oh, it's just one sentence, whoop-de-doo, but it's one powerful sentence that clearly defines your brand's position. So that's what we're going to end up with at the end of this workbook. All right, so you're going to be learning throughout this your brand's core values, the why of your brand, how you intend your brand to be perceived, how to convey a brand's value through framing, where your brand is positioned in a competitive landscape. So we already saw some examples of that with like Taco Bell and Horton Steakhouse, and how you can make strategic decisions utilizing your brand positioning statement. So what do we do to get there? How do we get there? We have 4 main things we'll need to discuss: what your brand does, how does your brand do what it does, and who does it serve, and why. So let's go ahead and dive in. And this is the part where I'd love for anyone to chime in, speak up, go on camera, share your workbook, whatever you'd like. So let's move into the first section. What does your brand do? So this is the section where you're going to have to pick some words, adjectives, verbs, or some suggestions. In the workbook, there are these sample words that if you go to the, I think, last page, all of these words are the exact core value words we offer all of our clients in that card sorting exercise that we do. When you're filling out your workbook, I would highly recommend you look through these words and see if anything resonates with you to be able to answer these different sections of the workbook. So what does your brand do? Has anyone gotten to this point in their workbook where they'd be willing to share what their brand does? What words did you use for this section? And feel free to just speak up.
I don't have the workbook yet. I got on a little late, but
Yep.
one of the sample words that stood out to me, I believe it was expertise. There were a few in there: expertise and growth. Are probably what describe, yeah, right here. Let's see. Team, growth, and committed is good.
So you have growth, where the heck is team, and committed is somewhere.
In the bottom, yeah, right there.
All right, so yeah, let's talk about that. Do you mind sharing a little bit, Casey, about what these mean to you and why that relates to what your brand does?
Sure. So like I said, I am a newer realtor. I
Yep.
started a few months back, but what I can say is, you know, it's statistically proven that in the first 2 years, realtors fail because it is commission-based, and because you're starting your own business, it takes a lot of, you know, I don't want to say work, but work to get yourself out there. So by staying committed, I'm able to really focus on what my big why is. And as I go through the motions of what I'm really doing, it shows me how I can grow, you know, whether it's my clientele or my skills. And then with team, you know, I'm on a team right now within my brokerage, and it really shows. There's some days where maybe I can't do something and, you know, one of my team members picks it up, or vice versa. So personally, these are the words that really stood out to me, because as I'm learning what I'm doing, it really, you know, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. So I would offer some guidance with the way you're utilizing these words for the what. I think those are some very powerful words in the way that you're using them, but I would challenge you to think about, for example, committed to your big why, right? Try to elaborate a little more about what that commitment means and who's that commitment to, right? Often a commitment is either to certain actions, behaviors, or to people, things like that, or ideas. So not that you have to answer that now, Casey, but just think about from a person who might be asking you, what does your brand do? If you were going to say, hey, I'm committed to bleh, what is that? What is that blah, blah, blah part, right? What is that what you're committed to? What really drives you there? So it seems like a very strong word for you. And that's, I'm really appreciative that you shared that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any what's that they want to share of what your brand does? Some
Yes,
words that
I
you might
do,
have picked?
please. Yes,
Sure.
I do, please. I don't
that
have
Ada?
specific words. Yes, it is. Thank you. I don't have
Yep.
specific words from there, but I do have a question, and I do, do you decide what your brand stands for separate from your product, or what's the relationship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm gonna be here with you for a moment to chat about that. So your let's say business, your company, right, has a brand all itself. Okay. And within that brand, if you have product, each of those might be sub brands of your larger entity. The idea, though, is that your larger entity's brand has certain core values of why it offers the products or sub brands that it does. So the idea is that there should be a relationship between the entity, the brand, the umbrella, right, that offers these products that may have their own name and logo and whatever underneath it. So they should kind of relate, or there should be an overlap to some extent as far as the core values. Does that make sense? Does that help kind of clarify that for you?
It does help to clarify that, because as soon as you explained that, I thought of what would be a theme that I want through all my products, which would be quality, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. So what does quality mean to you in that regard? So does that mean, I forgot what it was that you're selling, so I apologize. But does quality mean, really good ingredients or something like that? Does that mean it's really well made? Does that mean,
So I'm going to give you an example. I'm not saying that specifically what I'm going to sell, but for example, I might, include that. But let's say it's a clothing, or let's see, to keep it simpler, let's say a T-shirt or a utensil, like a cup, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then it's more about I'm guessing if we're saying quality for those elements or those product, it's probably the craftsmanship and how well made it is, right? And the intention of why it's made a certain way, and why people would like it in that regard. So yeah, the way you said that common thread could be quality between the product, that makes it a core value because it's consistent through all of that you offer, that your bigger brand offers. So,
and as I'm talking to you about it, it just come to mind, like the difference between, like, whatever, no name T-shirt, and then like a Champion. Everyone knows Champion is,
right.
certain quality.
Yeah. Right. You're going to expect certain consistency in the quality, right? Because it is a Champion shirt versus who knows what brand, right? That's exactly the idea.
Yeah. And so it's, so for me, I'd probably be somewhere in between there, because depending on the type of things, because I think if I was to do something like a T-shirt, I would want it to be fun too. So it would be something.
So it sounds like fun is something that's important to you then there as well. That has to come through as well, right?
Yes.
Yep. So those would be definitely the what you offer side core value words that you'll be putting down. It does look like we had Bethany share something. Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Ada. I appreciate that. I'm just going to read what Bethany had written for her list. Oh, there you are, Bethany. Do you want to read through it? Do you want to share? Do you mind? Let's see. I think you're muted there.
Oh, I did it again.
There you go.
So I'm thinking about how I want to refine my role as a musician and who I work with, and I'm adding a component of coaching improvisation for all ages and mainly beginners at this point. But that's what this list is coming from.
So some of those things that you've written, just because not everyone's going to be in the Zoom, some are watching on Facebook, are personal expression, freedom, imagination, connection and community, listening, warmth, empowering, inspire, innovation, excellence, healthy ergonomics, all ages, and kindness. So some of those definitely seem to be in the what pile here, which is good. The next couple of screens we're going to go into, I think, are going to be more appropriate for some of your words as well. So Bethany, I would say hang on to some of those words as we get into these next couple of pages, because I think they'll fit better there. But that very much spells out a very specific profile for a brand already, the words you chose. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Let's see here. Looks like we had something else chime in here, another text. Okay, so I'll come back to that later. It's so long for me to read right now. So let me pull up the screen for the workbook again so we can get back to that. So does everyone feel comfortable on the what side and just trying to get some words spelled out there?
Yes, I had something I would like to add, please. What just came to my mind is I can have a fun theme throughout my brand. That doesn't mean every single product has to be fun. It could just be that I have other ways of expressing fun through my brand.
100% agreed. Yes, absolutely. So the way in which you can show that fun could be subtle, right? And sometimes it could be maybe just colorfulness. Using certain colors can make it something fun, or it could be I don't know, if you have packaging, maybe the packaging is fun, or maybe it is the product itself is just fun, right? So there are so many ways you can incorporate that, and you get to determine, how do you kind of mix these ingredients and bake it into the brand. But yeah, I think that's a very good point to make there is utilizing these certain core values. It gets to be interpreted by you throughout all of your offerings. So very good point, Ada. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. All right, so let's move on to the next part here. This is where some people get stumped. Okay, this is 1B. I tricked you. I said there are 4 steps. There's 5. So 1B is who else solves the same problem or problems as you. Now, if you are offering certain things that don't necessarily equate to problem solving, that's okay. What you are doing though is you're providing a certain value or a certain experience. What we're asking here is who else in the minds of potential customers, not your mind, but the mind of potential customers, who else is a perceived competitor that could be solving the same types of problems as you, or offering a similar type of value or a similar type of experience in the mind of those potential clientele? Does anyone want to chime in on this one for themselves? Kind of talk through it a little bit? Okay, so for this, just to give a little bit more clarity, we just talked about the what of your brand, right? What does your brand offer? And the reason we're doing this, who else solves the problems or offers a similar value, is because what we want to do is we want to figure out in a kind of competitive landscape with competitors that you have to kind of be seen against. Even if you don't think they are a direct competitor, there are going to be others out there who are getting the attention of your ideal clientele or customers. Those are perceived competitors. And so what we want to do on this page is we want to think of who might those perceived competitors be that are going to get the attention of those ideal clients or customers that you would be looking to get for your brand. Does that help to clarify for you guys? Do you have any thoughts that you can share? Giulia, looks like you might have been ready to chime in there.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to basically say, the same thing. This was definitely something that for me personally was really hard to think about, because I was actually having a mental block as to who my competitors could possibly be.
Right. I'll often see that, especially like startups, they'll say, oh, I don't have competitors because I'm brand new, or because your thing is so unique in your mind that there's no one else doing this exact thing. That may be true, but again, it's not necessarily about who directly competes with exactly what you are offering, but those who perceive potential competitors to you, right? So what we're trying to figure out is, Giulia, can you help me think of maybe some sort of example of like one of the ones that you had for when you did this before? I think it was digital media sync. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I did do it for digital media sync, right? So it's a live streaming kind of component of known. We work with social media, giving information. So it's an educational tool, right? So if I were to think of, well, what would a competitor be? A competitor could be something like even LinkedIn Learning, right? There are episodes within LinkedIn Learning that talk about, there's a category that actually talks about digital media, digital communications, that sort of thing. It's huge and it's a competitor.
Right. But there's obviously a big difference between what you're
Mhm.
offering with Digital Media Sync versus like LinkedIn
Right.
Learning, for example, right? And what
Right.
you came down to is that even though they might be a perceived competitor, because again, you might have the same types of audiences you would share, right? But yours is different because you're much more intimate and personalized, whereas
Right.
the other side is not, right? And that's where we're
I'm
going with
available.
this.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
I'm,
you exist as a person.
I'm sitting right here.
Yep.
Whereas LinkedIn Learning, they might be like, well, we're there whenever you want us to be. I'm here only at certain times, live streaming, whereas LinkedIn Learning, you can turn on your computer, you can pick from a category and start going.
Right. So when we go back to, thank you, Giulia, for adding the context. I appreciate it. So when we go back to the workbook and we're looking at this 1B section of who else solves the same problem as you, we're really talking about who are your perceived competitors. I do have some examples at the bottom of this page, which I'll explain here. So a general contractor providing whatever services might be a perceived competitor to a roofing specialist. So theoretically, you were a roofing specialist and trying to create a brand for yourself, you might have general contractor, GCs, as one of these items you would write down as a perceived competitor. Or for example, if you ran a urgent care walk-in clinic of some kind, WebMD and search results might be a perceived competitor, right? So you don't have to be spot on with somebody who does exactly what you do, but rather somebody who's solving similar problems. So with that being said, I'd love for somebody to jump in. I don't know if, I think Ada and Casey, you both had jumped in. Bethany, you jumped in recently as well. Do you have any thoughts on some of your perceived competitors?
I think I have to think about this a little bit deeper because like you said, I am an independent contractor. So perhaps maybe, I don't know, I was thinking originally other independent contractors doing the same thing as me.
Mm-hmm. So Casey, were you the one that was doing the like realtor type stuff,
Yes.
like real estate? Okay. So you have apps that are out there that people go on like
Zillow and Realtor.
Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, right? All these things that are just using the MLS listing, right? And you have more ability to offer value than those things in
Right.
certain ways, right? But there's still going to be a perceived competitor to you just because you are competing for the attention of the same audiences. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I would definitely recommend maybe write down one or two of those, or even just, you know, categorize them as like web MLS apps. I don't know,
Right.
something
Yeah.
like that, right? And you might also, because you're it sounds like you're newer to this, you might put someone who is a much more established, large, multi-state based or even national entity
Right.
against
Like
yourself.
a top
Because
producer.
exactly. So what, you know, we're going to list them out as well, because there's going to be differences of why people wouldn't want to work with them and they would want to work with you, which we'll get to.
Right.
Right. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Ada,
Yeah, this is
Tony.
Ada. Yeah,
Yep.
in my mind, the business that I'm looking to start going into, there are going to be competitors. I mean, there's no doubt it's not that unique a product or anything. So that's why I'm doing things like this and going to class like this to kind of like, you know, inform myself so that I will know how to differentiate myself.
Yep. Could you just name some of those types of competitors just so we get an idea?
Well, you know, like I'm gonna be doing like e-commerce stuff. So for example, like, okay, eBay, there's going to be people on eBay, you know, and everybody knows eBay. And for example, you know, and people are selling things like that. So, you know, yeah, there's competitors, you know, I'm clear
and so,
about that.
And so when you think about who these competitors might be, it's important to try to write them down here, because later on in one of the coming up steps, we're going to position yourself directly against them. And we're going to come up with why somebody would pick you over them, right? So if you can, during this process, make sure you write down some of those. It might be eBay, it might be Amazon, it might be Walmart, it might be, and then
I'm not saying that eBay is my direct competitor, but I'm saying other people selling on eBay. So
exactly, right.
Multi-sellers on eBay, yes.
Exactly. So you'd want to write down what those types of perceived competitors are so we can come back and compare and contrast. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next step unless anyone wants to chime in.
Rick, it's
Going once.
Jennifer. I just want to kind of jump in with that.
Yep.
If you're, for example, doing e-commerce, it's like, I would say try to be as specific as you can be. So like if you're focusing on t-shirts, you know, then your competitors are going to be things like Nike and Adidas, but it also will be some of those smaller, like Snorg tees or something like that, that are selling more customized things. Or if you're doing candles, it'll be Yankee Candle. Or if you're selling soap scrubs, it'll be Bath and Body Works on top of all of those other smaller users.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for clarifying that, Jennifer. All right, so moving onward. How does your brand do what it does? We're finally on step 2. Woohoo. So how does your brand do what it does? And this is where I'd like you to pick some adjectives and verbs. So we've already talked about the what, right? So what is your brand? What is it offering? That sort of thing. But how does it do it? This is where you start to differentiate a little bit, at least at some level, from those perceived competitors you probably just wrote about or will be thinking about. And again, I would definitely recommend for the how, utilize these words here, because this might help create a sense of differentiation between you and other brands. So for example, words like edgy, fun, right, serious, simple, respectful, these change the tone of how your brand does what it does. So it's just kind of, it's an adjective, right? It's modifying what you're doing. So the idea is to be able to really define as best as you can, how does your brand do what it does? As many different abstract words here as possible, these core values. So does anyone have, anyone want to take a stab at that or share what they have for their how? I'll be rude and I'll let the silence sit until someone chimes in. But basically, let's go back and define the how a little bit more. Let's see. So again, if we are talking about what your brand does, and if you're in retail, let's do the t-shirt thing, right? You're selling some sort of t-shirts and you've already defined that you want to be fun, right? That came up a little earlier. So fun might be a how for you as well, right? Fun might be something you're trying to do throughout all of the things that you're offering with your shirts or your product or whatever it may be. I think, Bethany, some of your words that you had typed in and offered definitely were in the how side. I lost the chat, so I can't pull it up. But does anyone want to chime in and share a little bit of their hows that they are thinking?
I mean, I don't have a business, again, it's Jennifer.
Yep.
But would something be like, so say you were doing like a natural candle company, would your, like where you're sourcing your materials be part of your how? Like we're sourcing local, we're sourcing natural, we're not using paraffins. Is that the sort of thing that would go in your how, or is it more of the process?
It's all the above. So anything you do with your operations, anything you do with your process, anything you do with how you, like you said, if you're sourcing or picking certain things about what you're offering, those are usually going to be distinctive elements in your brand versus someone else. And that's really what we're trying to get down to, is what's going to make you contrast against other perceived competitors out there. So yeah, thank you for that question. So it looked like, go ahead, Ada.
What comes to my mind is, I mean, definitely if I wanted to, have a fun theme, I could use colors. I could use, like, if I was going to do a t-shirt, I can use a certain type of lettering, like, the old days they had what they call bubble letters, things like that. So you could use a certain type of, a type of lettering or calligraphy style, that's more fun. You can use colors. I can use like cartoons, things like that.
Yep. So then for you, you might do, fun might be one of your hows rather than the what in that case, right? But you might even put down more specific, colorful, playful, familiar, friendly, right? these are the things that are going to be really evoking a certain style of how your brand does what it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and that comes to mind, you know, when you say that in the friendly, it comes back then to like even how you say it, right? Like that weed for you, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So it's going to be more approachable, more accessible if you got a friendly vibe or tone going on with your language, right? And even colors do that. Certain fonts do that, etc.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Great. Thank you. All right. Moving on to the next section. So, who does your brand serve? This one should be a little easier than the perceived competitors and the how. Generally, this is who do you want as your ideal customers or clientele. If you have an existing business, it's easy to look at who you have that may not be ideal and contrast that against who you want, or look at your best clientele and go, okay, you know, let's write down something about them. Why are they the people I want to serve? So there's a reason I word this question the way I do. Who does your brand serve? And that's because your brand only exists when it has people to serve or companies to serve or whatever it is. And that may be by selling a product or a service or offering certain experiences, right? So you are serving your clientele in that sense, in which case, who are the people that are best suited for you to serve with what and how you do what you do?
Can I ask a question? Can you just
Please.
give an example, like in terms of like groups of people to serve? I mean, are you talking more like around age range demographics or like things like that?
Yep. So I'm speaking more about like the mindset or the psychological side, the core value side of it, rather than necessarily just saying people 25 to 35. Age is okay to use here, but I would challenge you to go more into the psychographic, as I call it, of who you're trying to serve. So this might be, you know, if you're thinking of like a certain type of person in your mind, like a stereotypical person, maybe it's a mom who has kids who's really busy. So you might have like busy moms, right? Or it might be a student who's in a certain grade range and they're struggling, or, you know, maybe whatever, right? So you might qualify that as like, you know, I don't know, young student or student with challenges or something like that. So it's really just trying to figure out the qualification of who is a good client or customer for you. Those who are seeking fun, or those who need or want something that supports them, or those who want to learn something, right? Try to define them with maybe a couple of words. That's really what we're trying to do in this section here. Does that help, Ada?
That was great. That was very great. Good clarification. Yeah.
Cool.
And I could
Cool.
see that now, because now I can think of like who would be that. Yeah, from there. Yes, that helps a lot.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer, do you have something?
Yeah, so one of the things that I find a lot when people come into I've Squared and the space, thinking about who their brand serves, immediately is like, I want to serve everybody. So narrowing that down to saying, okay, if I could only sell to one person or one type of person, who would it be? So think like some people, I'd be like, if they're doing like silicone straws, it's like, I want to be selling to someone who's eco-friendly. Like it's not like I'm not going to market this to everyone, though everyone should be using reusable straws, ideally. I'm going to be focusing on people who are eco-friendly, people who are, I don't know, people who regularly go out to eat, or people who regularly bring lunch from home, like something like that, rather than I'm going to the general market, because that's not going to help you long term. So focusing to saying, like, if I could only do it for one person and then branch out from there is kind of how I see people getting a little bit more specific with this step.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said.
It gave me an idea for like one of the, you know, a possible product, you know, or not, or maybe even a number of products. You know, I don't have everything sorted yet. It's not launched yet. So, but I'm thinking one thing I'm thinking of, people who are nostalgic.
that is probably a very strong one for you, right? If you base an aspect of your brand's priorities and core values on nostalgia, then that very quickly sets you apart from just going to eBay and finding random stuff, right? Or just look on Amazon for nostalgic stuff. You would be a vendor of sorts that sells things that produces nostalgia in people. And there are certain types of folks who are looking for certain types of nostalgia, right? Certain segments of market of product, or for example, collectibles, memorabilia, things like that, or could be shirts that have graphics that represent things from a certain time frame or pop culture of a certain time frame. There's so many ways you can kind of launch off from that you just said, Ada, as far as like nostalgia. So that could be part of your what, but also if it's part of your who, you have to define, what kind of person is looking for what type of nostalgia there, what sort of nostalgic effect. So you'd want to qualify that a little bit more probably, but that is a very strong word. I love it. Brings a lot of opportunity for you.
Yeah.
So great, thank you. So let me go back to sharing the screen.
No, Bethany just added in the comments
Yep.
that she'd like to develop marketing for two groups, children and adults, but have them under either a unifying umbrella or have one be a subset of the other, because the values are the same for both groups, but the needs of the groups are different. So I don't know if you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So that's a nice tricky one there, Bethany. Thank you. So you have a parent brand for you as the artist, musician, educator, whatever you're doing with your evolution of a brand here, right? You might have two versions of audiences in one main target market grouping, right? So you're breaking it out by age, and there's probably a reason for that, I'm assuming, based on how you provide the service and what exactly they're getting out of that, or perhaps maybe how much time you spend with them, whatever it is, right? So you're going to have a parent brand that's not going to be affected by that. But if you are branding products or productized services, meaning you're kind of packaging a service and giving it a name, then those services are going to have a sub-brand, essentially, each. They're going to be slightly different from each other just to identify that one's more for the younger audience and the reason they're different than the older audience. But your parent brand is still the same for you, Bethany, who's doing all of this. Does that make sense? Great. Double thumbs up. Nice. Cool. Very good question. All right, let's go back. All right, so I think we're good on this. So I'm going to move forward. All right, now the tough one, the why. So if you do have the digital version of the workbook, you are able to click on this link to watch Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's a required viewing for any entrepreneur, I believe. It's maybe 5 to 10 minutes long max. I'm not going to play it here, but basically all this why stuff we've been talking about throughout today's session, he really spells it out pretty clearly and gives very good examples about like how Apple as a company starts with why versus say Microsoft, who doesn't. They start with what's, which are like feature oriented, whereas Apple is all about like a lifestyle and certain simplicity effect that they go for. So I would highly recommend watching that video. Otherwise, for this workbook, I'd like you to use any words at this point: adjectives, noun, verbs, phrases. Try to limit it to 2 or 3 words max for any of these blanks. But why? What are the whys of your brand? Why do you do what you do? Or if you're so excited about this thing you're getting started with, why? Right? Let's try to list out some of those reasons for you, for this brand. What drives you to build this brand for yourself or for this company that you're working with? And then also another way to think about it, another example, why would an ideal client refer your brand to someone else? That's another why, right? So for example, if you're in real estate and you are competing technically against things like Redfin or Realtor.com or whatever, why would someone refer someone to you versus Realtor.com? I'm sure there are plenty of reasons. So those whys are what we're looking for here, right? Does anyone want to share a little bit of what they think their whys might be? And again, we can go down to these sample words here as well. So I will give you a quick hint profit is not usually a good why, because profit is usually a result, an end result, or a symptom of doing things well with business, rather than the why, right? So it's kind of a measurement of financial success, not necessarily a measurement of just why you're doing what it is. There's usually other core values that drive it. But, you know, oh, sounds like somebody was chiming in. Was it Julia, maybe?
I was just nodding my head.
Oh, I thought I saw something there. Okay. All
I
right.
was
Does
just
anybody?
looking-
Go ahead. I thought I heard somebody there. All right, so the why. So let me give you an example from my own company if this helps. So Krative, that's my company behind me there if you see me, brand strategy agency. The biggest why for me is growth. Personally, yes, but for my clientele, I love seeing them grow beyond where they started and moving forward towards a vision that they have, and growing their brand awareness, growing their revenues, growing their client base, growing their marketing presence. All these sort of growth elements are very consistent in why I'm driven to do the things I do in my business. Personally as well, I also love to help my teammates kind of gain more knowledge and skills and level up on my team with personal growth as well. So growth to me is one of my whys. Does anyone have any thoughts on what some of their whys might be with their brand as they're developing it?
And I just wanted to mention too that if you listened to Rick as he was describing that one word, there was really a lot of the value to himself, to his clients, to his team members. He could speak about it very easily. So this is something that as we're thinking about what our why is, that you can really you can build a story around it as well and build out your communications, and it starts flowing a lot easier for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. Because if you do tap into a why, I will say this sort of stuff will kind of just bubble up out of you. You're going to find some passion, some excitement, or you'll be inspired or motivated in some level. And that's really why I started with this why stuff 10, 11, 12, however many years ago with my clients, because I found that if we can tap into their why and tie that to their brand, then they're going to always have a reason to be motivated, inspired to get up every single day and work towards their vision of whatever it is for their brand, because that why is what drives them internally, intrinsically. And you can bake that into the culture of your company by defining it as a core value of the brand. And that way, if your brand grows beyond yourself, other people that you hire or work with should also resonate with the same whys, right? So anybody on my team that gets really excited to be a part of Krative, it's probably because they resonate with the idea of growth for themselves personally, for our clients, et cetera, et cetera. So for your own brand, it's really about looking deep, feeling deep, and trying to see if you can give that a label, a word, a phrase, and apply that towards your brand's core values and what drives it to do what it does, to decide how it does what it does.
Yeah, I would definitely still have to work on that, Zeta, in terms of, I mean, I know reasons I do things, but in terms of like making it concise and in a way that I can, I would have to work on that. But, you know, hearing, you know, everything that's been said, what comes to mind though, taking the same example of t-shirts, what comes to mind is, for example, I mean, there are many brands now because it's more well known now, but it doesn't come to mind a specific brand. But it's like, for example, the people who have made like cotton t-shirts or cotton clothing or made of hemp, you know, like a hemp type of material, type of a clothing, and that really is a strong why in terms of like you know, people who want to be more into organics, you know, the environment. And things like that.
So you tapped on something very important there, Ada. So a few moments back, we were talking about the how, right? And we talked about like maybe tying in fun to some of these brands might make sense. Well, here's the question: why? Why is fun important? Or if, like you said, if it's a t-shirt company, why are they choosing to source the materials that they do? There are reasons for that. those whys are what drives them to make those decisions that they do. And that's what we're trying to do here. So if they are using hemp, there are going to be some good reasons for that. Just write them down, Yeah, that's very good. So anyone else want to jump in on the why? Move forward. Okay, let's move forward.
Bethany also put in the comments,
Oh,
want to offer the sort of enriching musical opportunities that I would have loved to have as a child on a regular basis, to let improvisation be a core skill.
yeah, so that is a very personal core aspect of why this is important to you, Bethany. So now the only trick for you is to try to find a way to just kind of translate that in the mind of the potential people you're serving, right? The potential target audiences. So rather than being, yes, it stems from, the source is what you wanted and would have been great to have, but why? Why is it now important for you to make sure others have that? And if you can kind of spell that out, you have a really good shot at very efficiently and effectively clarifying your brand positioning if you can do that. And that really comes down to this why section we're on now. Yeah, great.
One of the things I would suggest as a word for Bethany is maybe like accessibility. Music is something that's not always accessible, especially in schools nowadays. So looking at accessibility as being kind of like that core value might be something to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Oh, she says you're totally right. Look at that. Awesome.
I do music on the side, so
so All right, so moving forward, this is where in the workbook I would ask, if you're doing this on your own, take a break. This work is deep work. We're doing like psychoanalysis on ourselves to figure out how we want to keep ourselves motivated in our own brand and our branding of businesses and marketing it. So that's exhausting stuff. So when all of you are working on this workbook or working on your brand positioning, it's okay to feel exhausted, tired, fatigued, and have to come back to it. Do it. Take the break. You're not doing anything wrong by doing that. You're actually helping yourself and serving yourself by doing so. Take the time you need, regroup, because when you do come back, often what will happen is, you know what, now that I haven't thought about it for a while, I feel like it's a little clearer to me. I can actually think of some words now. You might have a little bit more mental clarity or a little bit more mental energy to take on these sort of questions that we're asking. So with that being said, the rest of this goes a little bit quicker simply because I don't have anything written in this workbook other than how to do it. But I'm going to talk about that process. And again, if anyone wants to chime in with their questions and help filling out their workbook, please do so. All right. So this is just kind of tying it all together. I'll just kind of speak to the high levels of what's being said here. So what we're talking about is brand marketing, which really is just really expressing who your brand is, as far as what it offers, how it does it, who it serves, and why, right? So those are all the things we just talked about. When you have all these elements, you now have defined a way to articulate, I should say, a way to convey your brand in a unique fashion compared to another brand that might be out there or other competitors. So there may be a lot of competitors in your market space, but if you can do your unique value proposition, which is all we're doing so far, we're defining the what, the how, the who, and the why, then you're going to be able to make yourself stand apart from the crowd, right? So that's really what this page is talking about here. So let's move forward. So how do we do this? How do we use those things you just figured out, the who, the how, the what, all that stuff, to properly position your brand? The way we do that is we have to apply context. So if I were to compare my thoughts of, I don't know, let's say I heard the word Nike for the first time, and Giulia heard it at the same exact second I heard it. We would both interpret this word Nike or this brand or this logo Nike very differently based on our own upbringing, our own worldview, our own perspective of how things work, and what associations we make to that name or that brand, Nike. And the way we kind of resolve this when we put out our advertising, when we put out our marketing message, when we talk about our brand, when we name our brand, when we do any of that stuff, choose colors, right? What we're doing is, in order to effectively communicate it so everyone understands it similarly, is we have to frame it, give it context. And that's why in the earlier exercises, we did those quadrants, if you recall. we had the Taco Bell on one side, we had the Morton Steakhouse on the other side. If we didn't have Morton Steakhouse, Taco Bell can pretty much be anything, right? And everybody interprets it differently. But once you compare and contrast it with some framing, it suddenly has context because it's in relationship to everything else out there. And we're giving that context. So it's a really good trick in marketing to be able to say, hey, we're good because, and compare and contrast all these reasons to something else, right? So that's really what we're going to be doing here. So an example might
Can I
be.
follow up with a question for that before you get too far?
Yep.
Should you be comparing to one other company or multiple companies at the same time?
Definitely want to work towards multiple. Definitely want to work towards as many. It might not be companies. It might be types of companies. It might be other brands in general, right? So we definitely want to have more than one. So it's a good question. So I did mention compare and contrast against one. That was really just for an example. But ultimately, we are going to be creating a landscape of competitors and seeing where your brand fits in all of them. So good question. Now, an example of framing would be Acme Company has proudly created a new drink, which is designed to provide energy with low sugar and great taste. That is all the what. We did not talk about the why. We did not talk about the how too much other than low sugar, great taste, right? So great, Acme Co has a new drink, low sugar, great taste, wonderful. This can be framed as a healthier soda or energy drink, or this can be framed as the more scientifically proven sports drink for athletes than others on the market like Gatorade or whatever. So just by how you compare and contrast it in a market space and saying, hey, we exist over here amongst this group of brands, people now know how to compare and contrast you. So that's what framing is from a high level. Does that make sense so far? Any questions on that?
Yeah, I'm asking a lot of questions for someone who doesn't have a business.
Yeah.
Can you use both and frame it differently depending on which audience you're talking about or talking to, or should you pick one? I accidentally muted you instead of muting me, sorry.
It's all good. So ideally, you're going to want to narrow it down to fewer ways to frame or position your brand. But you're right to say that depending on which audience or campaign you're working on, right, you might frame it differently. So for example, Apple, again, right, they have Apple computers. They also have iPhones. They actually have two very different target markets for both of those, but it's the same parent brand. And the way they market, advertise, do photography, show commercials, all that stuff, is very different. You'll notice a lot of the iPhone stuff, it skews younger, more colorful, more playful, more vibrant, and everything's all about simple and connectivity. Meanwhile, on the computer side, they're really just showing sleek, high-end computers, which may or may not necessarily appeal to the younger crowd, right? So, but overall, that all fits their parent brand, but these are sub-brands that they have, and those sub-brands might require different framing when they put out into the market space for marketing purposes. Does that help a little bit clarify that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Now, positioning your brand. This is where you actually get to do the work, everyone. So if you were to look at, I think your page 8, your why page, if you came up with something, some words, this is where you get to pick one of your words or maybe come up with a new word that represents the words you've already written down. And in the quadrant that's on the screen here in your workbook, where it's highlighted yellow, put your best word that you can pick in that spot on the left side where the yellow is. And what we want to do is we want to take something that is kind of the opposite or kind of a little bit different, maybe one of your competitors. So again, let's go back to the real estate, realty, property stuff. So, you know, was it Casey? Was that you? Do you mind if I pick on you for a moment?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm loving this.
Do you have any whys that we can utilize?
I'm still like thinking about it because the perspective that you told me to think about it in was a lot different than, you know, other workshops that I've done before.
Yep.
But one of them that keeps popping up a little bit more than others is obviously for, you know, focusing on the community, on the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my biggest one.
So does that mean like the relationship dynamic? Is that really what you're talking about? Okay,
Yep.
so let's say relationship is your word there, right? you're really creating a bond and a connection with your relationship. So we would put that on the left side. I think I might be able to do this live here. Relationship, right? Now, what would, let's say one of your competitors would be like realtor.com. I don't think they're all about building relationships.
You're
I think
right.
they're more about the scale. So what would be like something that's not relationship, but they might pick as a word that is a benefit for them? Like, I'll just pick anything, just not relationship.
Would it be like accessibility?
It can be. So in what way?
So because it's so the information is out there for everybody to see rather than what realtors see because we have the databases for it.
Okay, so this is more about that mass broadcasting of information that they do rather than the relationship.
Right.
Okay. So
I
I'm gonna
want to think about maybe like personalized versus broad rather than relationship versus something else, because personalized and relationship can go together.
Right.
But it's easier to look for alternates of personalized than it is relationships.
I agree actually. Sure, why don't we change that?
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah. And then what would be your competitor word that you'd want? Generalized or?
Yeah, generalized.
Sure, let's go with it. So now you can see, I don't think like the other company, the competitor that we're talking about, would call themselves generalized. They might say we have a huge database of information that anyone can get, and they might choose accessible, as you called it earlier. But
Right.
for the perspective of your brand positioning, we're going to call it generalized, just so you get that good contrast of the words. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Great. So already your brand, just looking at this, I would assume would be somewhere on this side, and this quadrant here on the left side, right? Now let's go to this next page. This is where we're going to pick another word for the top section, where we have this little C spot, and this is going to be either your how or your who, depending on your own brand and what's more important to you. So if you guys were to look back at your how section, page 6, or your who section, page 7, and look at what you have written in there, pick one of the most prominent and more important or critical ones to you that might be a core value. And that's what we want to put up in this top section up here. And Casey, if it's okay with you, I'd like to stick with your example and try to work it through. So do you mind thinking about either the how or the who and give us one of your words that we can flesh out?
Sure. Let's see. For the who.
Sorry, I'm just gonna. Hello. All right, here we go.
Perfect. I think that the how. I'm sorry, can we go back up to
Yep. You want to go up to the who?
yeah.
Sure.
Okay, yes, right here. Who does your brand serve?
And again, we might not want to do so much like this age to that age, but it might be like in your realm, I'm assuming you might have people in certain stages of life.
Yeah,
right?
like first time homeowners.
Exactly. So if you know you're going to specialize with them, you might say first time homeowners, or you might even go even more specific about what about them, right? So is there a reason you like to work with them? And if so, what is that? So don't know if you have an answer to that, but
So
that's
for me personally,
example.
it is because of the age range that, that demographic, because I relate more towards first time homeowners rather than people who are used to it like investors.
Okay. So now we have a few ways to do this. So you're thinking the who would be the kind of the younger, it sounds like first time home buyers, right? Is that what you're saying? And you could relate to them, right? So it's either the who with regard to the age range and first time home buyer situation, or it's more about the relatability. Which one is more important to you with your brand?
Relatability.
All right, so I'm gonna just put that for now. We can tweak it if we need to. And then again, not that the other people would say they're unrelatable,
right?
But is there something that maybe a competitor, let's go with the same competitor again, if it makes sense, like realtor.com. What is it that makes them unrelatable and why would they be okay with that? Like, let's just talk about it and see if we can get the word.
Yeah. Well, I think that they're two totally different experiences. So while I'm trying to work on my relationships and making it as personable as possible, realtor.com is really there for, like we said, the general public to just gain some information on what the market is.
Okay, so they are really just putting out info. That's pretty much their thing. And you're connecting with them, essentially.
Right.
So, all right. What's the way we can say that in less than a few words here?
Yeah.
Putting out info, right? Giulia, you're usually pretty good at that part. Say it again.
Informational.
Yeah, let's go with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So now, based on these quadrants, I'm going to just I'm going to go ahead and just copy these down there real quick. Don't mind me. So now the idea is to plot where you see your brand living. And what I would say is, rather than just saying like, how the heck do I do this? Give me a second. Let's see, I don't want to fill it. Don't fill, but we want a border. Great. Oops, undo. All right, so your brand would be somewhere in this quadrant, I'm assuming. Where would you want to place it?
Yeah, perfect. That's right there.
Right here? Okay, that was just a random little guess there. So it's okay if it's bigger or smaller, whatever, but let's put you here, right? And then just go ahead and put your, good, we get the idea. All right, let's pick some of your competitors. Who were the other people that you listed on that 1B?
I said top producers, maybe another like Zillow.
Yeah. Great. So let's put them somewhere where they should fit based on your perspective.
So Zillow to me, definitely on the bottom right.
Okay. Somewhere here, or in the middle.
A little maybe to the right.
Somewhere around here.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. That was Zillow, you said, right?
Yep.
Cool. How about the top producer folks?
Oof, the top producer maybe on the top right.
Okay, is that because they can be a little bit more relatable, but they're not as personalized? Is that the idea?
I think they're maybe, yeah, a little relatable, but the reason why I put them under, the generalized portion of it was because, typically they work for so many people that they don't have, I don't want to say one specific target market, but, one specific target market.
Yeah, great. That makes a lot of sense to me. And now the idea would be you want to fill in as many, and this goes back to Jennifer's question, as many competitors into this as possible, because what we'll end up with, don't mind the mess I'm about to make, is maybe something that looks like, maybe this, right? And they wouldn't all be top producers. These would be,
Right.
brand 3, brand 4, you get the idea, brand 5.
Yep.
And now just based on that, this automatically tells us that your brand stands apart from all of these perceived competitors for the same types of audiences in general, because it is more personalized and more relatable. And if you can compare and contrast yourself against this brand versus that brand versus that brand, each of those comparisons gives you new ways to convey or communicate or display with like graphics, ads, pictures, colors, fonts, all those things, how you're different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, got it.
Yep. Does anyone else have any questions while we're at this point? Because we're getting pretty close towards the end, a couple of steps. I just want to make sure we get any questions in while we're here. Bethany, you good? Looks like a thumbs up. Okay, great.
Yeah, if everybody wants to just pop a thumbs up if we're all doing good, we're following along fine, and that sort of thing. Just to check in.
Cool. Thank you. Great. Perfect. All right. So this is where you would start analyzing. So Casey, we did a very quick and dirty version for you of that brand positioning map there, the matrix. But what I'd love for each of you to do when you get a chance, and you're able to do this on your own after this workshop, is to go back through this and try to think of more competitors and really fill in that grid as best as possible. Because the more data points you're comparing against, the more analysis you can do. And that's where you get some really unique insights as far as what makes you even more unique or special or valuable to those target markets you want to serve. Another thing I will add in is that you don't have to do just one chart like this, one graph like this. You can do several with different words. If you came up with several concepts or core values that are important to you, you can decide to do a few of these that would make more context for you. Yes, Ada, looks like you have a question.
Yes, my question is, okay, I know we're talking about branding, and where does like is it part of branding, or is that separate in terms of like the sales pitch or sales message for your, like if you have a product, you're not actually like at a store, or like so the product has to kind of sell itself. Is the sales pitch somewhere within the branding?
Yep.
So
your sales messaging, your communication strategies that you're talking about, right? So whether that's your advertising or your sales pitch, your elevator pitch, or any of those things, they stem from your brand strategy, which is all about your brand positioning. So brand strategy is kind of a catch-all term for things related to your brand and being strategic. Brand positioning is taking a whole bunch of factors about your brand and figuring out why, who, what, all that stuff, right? And then you end up figuring out how do you define your brand compared to the competitive landscape. The way you define it is exactly what gets turned into a sales pitch, or it gets turned into a tagline, or it gets turned into a flyer or an advertisement or whatever. So by going through this process, when you do this analysis stuff, these next couple of pages, that's where you start going, oh, I see. The reason people, the clients that I want to work with love me and want to work with me or purchase from me, whatever it is because I am much more relatable. I create a relationship with them. I stick with them throughout the process. We're partners, right? These are all the same way, or all different ways to talk about what Casey had here with one of her quadrants, this top left one, right? And you could probably make 4 or 5 different ways to communicate that pretty effectively based on that. Does that help, Ada?
Yeah, I mean, it helps. It's
a little bit.
Yeah, it helps a little bit. It's something, to obviously
There's
work
a couple
on.
more steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it's once you get to this point, and we can start looking at it and looking at, what are the differences between, why are these couple of brands in the top right different than me, or why am I different than them, my brand, right? If you can compare just those alone by themselves, then that's one campaign right there, one marketing campaign saying we are more personalized than the generalized folks, top producers in the area, whoever, right? We're more personal. Or for you, Ada, I think you might have been the one with the retail and the shirts and stuff like that. It might be, yes, you can get custom shirts from this website or that place or whatever, with, whatever kind of designs on them, but theirs aren't as fun and unique as ours, or they aren't using the same material that we use, or whatever it is that makes yours distinctly different than that grouping of competitors. And I'm saying that simply because these two are close to each other.
Yeah, I understand it, and that is like the Casey's industry is very different. That's real estate is very different than like a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that one. People are really going to look critically at all those things carefully before making a decision. It's compared to buying a $10 or $15 or $20 or whatever t-shirt or $25 t-shirt.
And it's,
Right.
Go ahead, Giulia.
Well, what I was going to say about that too is, if you have a t-shirt company and you have many competitors, right? Maybe things like there's a term called customer centric, right? So even in the process of buying online, if people are finding that they're having a really good relationship. So one of my favorite hair brands that I actually talk about is Overtone, right? My hair is blue right now. I buy it because I like the color. but I also buy it because the verbiage, the communications, the perceived back and forth. I know somebody's not there physically talking to me, but the way that they communicate through the vocabulary and the words that they choose, it's fun, yet still informative, and it's engaging. These are all things that I like. It's vibrant like the color. So same thing with how you talk, about your, it's not just the products, it's not just the t-shirt. It's that, however you convey, is it, what's that customer centric kind of effect that you're providing?
And the other thing that I would like to add to that is, even though it might seem like some people will just buy any sort of t-shirt, the trend is moving towards people wanting less fast fashion, people wanting more sustainable fashion, people wanting more environmentally friendly fashion, people wanting things that might be unique and fun, but not, but something they want something ethically sourced. They want things like that. That is becoming more of a cultural focus, especially in the United States. So that's something to consider too. It's like, I'm not gonna buy something that is not ethically sourced if I can avoid it. So
yeah,
thank you to all of y'all, all the 3 persons that just spoke. Yeah, because that kind of like speaks to, even if it's a t-shirt, then getting more on that why, that why about,
is it humorous? Is it inspirational? Is it, what are the things that like, and not just one-off buying a t-shirt for $15, right? It's like, are they going to come back and be customers again and again and again because you have used this relationship with them?
Like, think about, what is it, the sneaker company, is it Tom's, that it's like they would donate 1 pair of shoes for every pair of shoes you bought. So it's like people will keep coming back because they want to support that endeavor. It's not necessarily because the shoes are fantastic or not. I don't know, I've never worn them, but it's something that I remember because I know I like the message that that's providing.
Those
so
are all
hopefully really, that'll be helpful too, because if you feel like you get stuck, right, you get to the point where it's like, gosh, I really love, designing these t-shirts and sourcing the material, do whatever, but I feel stuck communicating about it, and now I don't feel so good about it. It's like, what are the things that do make you feel good? How can you kind of pull yourself back in?
Yeah, that's that personal core values and building it into why you're doing what you do.
That's even better if you can get it out of your own personal core values.
Yeah.
That even makes it more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of companies that came out after Tom's following that same model because they realized it's a viable business model. If people believe in your cause and the thing you're selling, you're giving away a certain amount of money or product to those in need, then people are buying it because they want to support that cause as well, right? So it's, why are you doing this, right? It can't just be to sell stuff. I'm sure there's other reasons. And why are you making things you make? Why do you want to offer them to who you want to offer them to? That's why we went through all those questions earlier of the, not just the what, but the who else does this, the how, and then who you serve. If you can answer those as honestly as possible, then this why starts to come a lot clearer and easier to think about. And then it gets easier to start defining those words you would use to sell it. So it is a process, and I'll be very candid. We have clients that pay us a good amount of money to do this work for them. And even then we have to drag them through the process with us because it's ultimately their brand and their core values. We can't tell them what they believe in. We have to help them find what they believe in and why they do it. And we just help them put words to it. That's it. So
how
this
much
workbook,
nicer if it just evolves from you. I'm just saying.
Well, if I could just do it all, here's what you're going to do. Whole business model done. Yeah, so hopefully that helps, Ada, with the idea of how this.
Absolutely. This whole, it's been a great, this whole, couple hours, very good course workshop.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to do a check-in for everyone because we're coming towards the end here. Any questions, or is this helpful just want to hear any feedback at this point of your own brand positioning and working on it through this process, see where you guys are at. Looks like Bethany gave a little heart there. That's great. Love that. Looks like we have like Casey, Tony, Amber, Kelly. I see you there as well. Is this helping you guys with any of your brand positioning and trying to decide where you're going with this?
Definitely. It makes me think about everything in like another, to another extreme, I guess.
Good. I'm glad I can help you with that mental exercise.
Yes, I think it was very informative.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Hopefully the workbook, you're all able to download it and utilize it to your advantage. Tony, were you chiming in there as well?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you firstly. And I'm kind of quite new in business. So it's at least I know what sort of things I need to take into consideration now, because I just didn't know how to get to this point. So this process was very, very helpful and useful. So and essential. So thank you very much.
Great.
But
I'm very glad to hear that.
Question, nothing to do with the session, but your presentation, what platform did you do that on, please? Because I really like the layout of that.
Let's see. I have so I'm doing it all on a Mac, so an Apple Mac computer. So I was using Keynote, which is basically PowerPoint for a Mac for the first one, or the first half. And the second one is all done in Pages, which is built into all the Macs. It's like their Word. I just designed it in such a way that it looks more like a workbook, so I can export it and offer it as a workbook. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, very welcome. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna actually maybe 5 more minutes or so to go through with you guys, and then we'll have any Q&A, and then we can wrap up. So this here, now that we've gone through this process theoretically, hypothetically, and you've created your own thing that might look like this at the end, right? Except different colors, right? Ideally, your brand compared to a bunch of other possible competitors out there. Once you've done that and you've assessed what are those differences between your brand and these other things that you've plotted on this grid, then we can start deciding, now what? Well, you should really congratulate yourself on doing this work, because this is stuff that we as an agency do over months with large organizations. So if you're able to do this within a week or two, you're doing fantastic. And let alone in a 2-hour session that we did today. So good job getting here at this point when you do. And then now it's a matter of deciding, how do I use this? Now what do I do with this information, right? And I think it was maybe Ada that was asking, how do we turn this into like sales talk, right? Great, I know I compare myself against a certain competitors with this like chart, where to go with this thing, right? Once you've gone through these next few pages, which way too much time to do right now, and made notes, these notes are going to be your communication strategies, how you will define your brand or what it offers. And that's when you can take all of this and create your brand positioning statement. So a brand positioning statement is literally just a sentence or so that helps to define your brand's offering and the value proposition in some sort of like efficient, concise manner, right? So with this brand positioning statement, you'll be able to kind of streamline decision-making processes later. So I think, Tony, you said you were very new. This sort of process, if you can do this up front as best as possible, again, not perfect, just trying to always get closer to perfect, you'll be able to start thinking about which products and services align with your brand. You'll be able to think about what kind of culture do you want to build and foster within your organization or your business if and when you decide to hire on anybody, right? The tone of voice and the messaging that you can use in all your marketing and sales stuff, right? Whether that's external to potential customers and clients, or that's internal in your own organization, the way you speak to your own people, right? All of this is influenced by everything done in this workbook. And even the types of marketing campaigns you might go after. So we hinted before, I think it was, was it Bethany maybe, where there was like an older demographic and a younger demographic, similar service, but offered differently for the same brand. Those are 2 different marketing campaigns. That's it. You're just saying them a little bit differently, and they're going to be appealing to each market a little differently based on who they are. Same brand. So with your core values figured out, with your brand positioning statement done, you are going to be able to make a lot of decisions a lot quicker, a lot easier in your business to grow it moving forward. And marketing becomes a cinch because then you know, well, here's all we have to say. Just put that on a web page, put that on a brochure, tell that to people you talk to, and you'll be in a really good spot. So let's look at a couple brand positioning statement examples. So it's plug and play, Mad Lib style here, right? So your brand name, so let's say my company, for example, Krative provides target market. So why don't we say small businesses with what's my unique value proposition? For me, it's brand strategy. That's it. I'll just say brand strategy. So Krative provides small businesses with brand strategy services, I guess, by, and then D was my how that I would have written, but I didn't write. So for me, it's going to be by defining core values and brand positioning, right? So that is a very logical statement to make, but it was a lot of work to get to that and to be so clear about exactly what my brand's positioning is. So Mad Libs, throw your words together, you get a sentence, you have a brand positioning statement. So that's the simpler one. And we do have a little bit more complex one if you guys wanted to be adventurous. So I'll do an example again for mine. For Krative, my brand, I'm sorry, my bad. For my target market, for small businesses, Krative, my brand, is the marketing firm, so that's my category I'm in, that best provides brand strategy because Krative is the only marketing firm that does brand positioning and core values. So that makes it extremely clear to my internal folks, my team, about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and who we do it for in one sentence. If you can get to this point with your brand, you'll be very, very well positioned, pun intended, to market your brand based on brand marketing rather than just traditional marketing as we talked about earlier in this session. Any questions on that? Does that make sense, what we came up with at the end here?
Yeah, what occurred to me is that I like the part that when you said that once we've done all this, it is going to be very easy to make decisions.
Yes.
You know, that makes all this work worth it because you know, analysis paralysis.
100%. Yes. And to kind of relate to that, the reason I came to this in my company, when I first started, I was 20 years ago, I was starting as a freelancer, as a designer, right? And I was just making logos and websites and brochures for people willy-nilly, right? Just a freelancer, not knowing exactly what I'm doing. But I realized that a lot of times my designs I was making for people weren't actually helping them to grow their business or effectively position them or sell their product or whatever it was, because I was just making things that I thought looked good and the client thought looked good. It had nothing to do with their value proposition or their brand positioning or their target markets, or who they serve or any of that. So I learned through a lot of trial and error that, the best brand strategy is to do this hard work up front where you discover your brand positioning early on. So that way it becomes a heck of a lot easier to decide which colors make sense. What type of photos do I use? Do I use like real photos or stock photos, or do I use illustrations? Do I use certain taglines to convey something? All that stuff became a lot easier once we realized the brand position first. Then designing was a cinch. It was very easy to know what we were trying to say because we knew who we were saying it to and what we were trying to say. It was already defined. We just had to put it together. So that's kind of where this came from. Cool. So, excuse me. That is the end of the workbook. Just to share this again real quick. The very last page is just where you get to write your brand name and your brand positioning statement itself. Or for any of you watching this, you get to this point, when you get to this point, I'd be very happy to offer a free consult to review it with you and talk about what this means for your next steps as a free consultation, no obligation. That goes to anyone who attends the NHFBL workshops like this. And anybody that's watching this in the future as well, for the foreseeable future at least. After this page, you'll see a place where you can go claim that free consult. So feel free to do that if you want, no obligation. There's no sales pitch. It's really just to help you review it, make sure it's helping you move forward with your brand. And I'm sure Giulia, being the entrepreneur in residence, would be happy to review this with any of you as well. And she and I work very closely together on a lot of projects, so she knows all about this too.
Right, and I put my my office hours, the Calendly for my office hours in the chat just one more time. So please feel free and take advantage of that and all the other resources at the library as well. So once you start getting into building a business plan and doing research and you know, if you have questions about who your target audience is, I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but I think there's 7, 8 digital platforms that are available through the library. And I'll often point to that during our office hours time when you have more specific questions.
Now I get to do my end sales pitch. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Just for future programming, on February 16th, we are running a class on email campaign tools. So looking at Constant Contact and MailChimp and things like that, what the differences are, what would be best for you, helping you make those decisions. We are running an advanced Adobe Illustrator class on the 17th, a mozzarella cheese making class on the 18th.
I'm so hungry.
a class on a first in a series on B corporations that Giulia is hosting with a special guest on the 23rd. The library is closed for President's Day, which is the 19th and the 21st. And then also, even though applications are closed for our Make to Sell cohort for this upcoming cohort, the classes are going to be available to the public. So if you have further questions about writing a business plan, taxes, insurance, anything like that, feel free to attend those classes. Make an appointment with Giulia if you just want some one-on-one help, or contact us at the library. We are open every day but Sunday. You can access the library at nhfpl.org, which I'm sure all of you know, considering that's how you signed up for this webinar today. So again, my name is Jennifer and I'm the manager of I've2. Thank you to Rick and to Giulia for hosting this. If you have any other questions, feel free to let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
If we wanted to follow up with you, do we have your contact information?
My contact information or Giulia's?
Or Rick's.
I thought Rick said he was available for something. Did I mistake?
So Giulia,
Giulia is available for one-on-one office hours. The link to schedule those is in the chat.
Okay,
it's a Calendly link. You can schedule those. I think you're there 3 times a week.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah, I'm not there right now, but I am there 3 times a week. Tuesdays from 11:30 a.m. until 1:30 p.m. Thursdays from 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. and then Fridays from 2 p.m. until 4 p.m. Except for today when I was doing this.
For any like business related questions, is that what that is?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
and then just to recap what I was saying before, if anybody wanted to review their brand positioning workbook once they've completed it, I'd be happy to give a free consult on that as well. And that is in the end of the workbook. You'll see the instructions for that too. And again, Giulia is more than qualified as well because she works with me on these same exact things on shared projects with clients too.
Rick, once we really, once we sit down to work through this, how long, from someone who's starting from scratch, like, a number of us are, how long we can expect, putting whatever amount of time to complete this?
Realistic, like actual time sitting and doing this, I'd probably say like 4 to 6 hours. Because there's going to be a lot of going back and forth, trying to decide, do I want to, if it's new business, do I want to sell this? Do I want to sell that? Is this my target market? Is it not? If you already have a business, probably maybe a couple hours, 1 to 2 hours, because you've already defined some of that stuff. But going in from scratch, it's going to take a little bit longer, and that's totally appropriate, I think. So somewhere around that range.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And thanks for having me.